after you graduated, you came back here. Did you try truck farming?
Yeah. So I graduated from UC Davis. The family had this property here. I had it in my mind that I could, grow vegetables and then sell them at a roadside stand. And so that's exactly what I did. And it was I love projects. It was just really, really, really hard. And I loved the hard work, but I don't think I've ever worked quite physically so hard in my life. But I worked for 2 years and I netted $4,200 or something like that. And so then I thought, well, I had to get a job in my, the field I studied in. And so I somehow ended up at Zaca Mesa. And
how did that come about? I mean, were they like looking for somebody, or did you look for them? Or
I think I looked for them. I'm not sure how I ended up there. There weren't too many choices, of course.
Yeah.
There was Firestone, there was Zaca.
Well, there was like Santa Ynez Winery and Rancho Sisquoc and
right. Yeah.
I mean, there were a handful. Sanford and Bennett. There were a handful of wineries, but Zaca Mesa, along with Firestone, were kind of the
ones where you
could
get it.
Yeah, where you could get a job. Yeah,
where you could get a job.
And
so interviewed with Ken Brown, the winemaker at the time. I'm not sure why he hired me, but he did.
and what was your role there?
Matt Bootman was doing. You remember Matt?
Yeah.
He was doing kind of the lab work, but I somehow ended up taking over that work.
Right.
I think Ken really thought that maybe I could be more precise. I don't know. I mean, he was a good guy, but maybe it wasn't his cup of tea.
Well, and I think he had one foot out the door probably around that time too.
Yeah, I think that's partly why Ken hired me. And also, I mean, he was, by then I was, I was a wine geek. I wanted to learn everything I possibly could learn.
Yeah, no, and I remember when you were hired there, because I was hired to run the little wine shop the owner of Zaca Mesa's son, John Ream, owned. So we kind of arrived in the Santa Ynez Valley, or in the Zaca Mesa sphere, around the same time. And did you live on the ranch?
Yeah,
on the Zaca Mesa ranch?
Yeah, I did. And so actually at the winery, there was a mobile home that was, basically Ken's office and the laboratory, and there was a bedroom, and so I don't know how long I was there, but for at least 6 months, if not 8 or 9. I really loved that experience. I mean, it was very it's pretty far out there. There's a lot of wonderful wild animals to see, and the country is beautiful.
It's a great place. Yeah, no, it's an awesome place.
Yeah, I was living there. I'd go for a walk or a run or whatever, and occasionally there would be a car that would drive by. And they'd be driving away from LA, that people would say, is this the right direction to go to, blah, 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 to Santa Barbara? And it's like, you can't get there from here, buddy.
So I started at Zaca Mesa right before the '79 harvest. That was the first year that we all worked together.
Right. I mean, I was just hungry to learn everything I could, and I know that you brought on board a lot of the ideas for doing wine tastings, comparative wine tastings. Jim was a dynamic personality, to say the very least. We clashed plenty, I'm sure. He definitely, he had the passion for wine too, and I think that's why the three of us were there. All three of us were like, we were going to learn this.
No, exactly. And Ken was very passionate about wine too. He was
absolutely.
He was different. What was it like for you working with Ken?
It was all good with me. I think Jim really had a hard time with Ken. He was not conflict adverse. I was probably easier to talk to, and so he was. He taught me everything that he knew. It's just that none of us knew that much. that was the problem, and so we all learned a lot. I think we were more artist free spirits.
Right. Yeah. No doubt about it.
And so there was a little oil and water there. Both Jim and I quickly grew out of wanting to be there, and at the same time, Zaca was going from this sort of more modestly sized winery, very high, kind of quality oriented, to, growing the business. And when you do, oftentimes quality goes out the window to some degree, even though it's not.
No, it was changing for sure.
I had a great experience with Ken. He was, he taught me all sorts of stuff.
What I like to say about that time at Zaca Mesa is I learned a lot what to do and a lot what not to do.
That's part of winemaking is part of it's, you taste wines, and so, but you don't have to taste great wines to learn a lot. You can taste wines that have issues and problems, and you might learn a lot more than tasting a great bottle of wine. And same thing in the work environment. you might learn just as much about what you don't want to do as what you do want to do. And
Sure.
And thus it was.
In 2013, thanks to Edible Santa Barbara Magazine, we had a gathering to celebrate Zaca Mesa's 40th anniversary. Jim Clendenen and I hosted the group for a lunch at our winery of winemakers, assistant winemakers, lab techs, cellar rats, vineyard managers, and vineyard workers. Over lunch and many bottles of our wines past and present, we reminisced about our times at Zaca Mesa and what we fondly refer to as Zaca U.